I've launched over 600 cold email campaigns, and I'm going to go walk you through the exact strategy that I follow in order to launch them very quickly. So first off, what is cold email strategy? Is the process of identifying who we want to reach out to, gathering data, and ultimately having the strategy that will get people who don't know us yet to ultimately convert. Now, there are a few components of this. The TAM definition stands for really total addressable market. Message market fit is finding the messaging that works with our ideal buyers, of turning them from someone who doesn't know us to ultimately having them want to learn more. Then there's an aspect of this where it's data and then variable collection. So how are we actually going to go get this data? Which sources is that data coming from? And then which enrichments do we need in order to create variables for our cold email campaigns? We'll identify the offer strategy of how we want to position ourselves inside of the market. And then we'll also cover a testing framework. So first off, before anything really starts, we want to understand how big is the pie that we operate in. So what we could do is we go to ChatGPT, we could say, hey, I sell marketing services to e-commerce brands. How many e-commerce brands are in the US? And then what ChatGPT will come back to you with is saying, hey, there might be 100,000 e-commerce brands in the USA that you can reach out to. Because we have this metric, gives us an understanding of which type of messaging we could use. The last thing that we want to do is use very static messaging to a small audience, because we don't want to burn the bridges with those prospects. If we have a massive TAM, that TAM will be more forgiving if we use more static messaging. But again, take this with a grain of salt. So when we're looking at our TAM, we want to understand, okay, what databases can we use? How complex do the messages have to be? How much time do I have to put into finding the variables? And then how many touches do I want to have in a campaign? If it's a massive TAM, you may stop at maybe only one email, maybe only two emails. If you have 1,000 prospects in your niche, then you may reach out to every single one of them 10 times over a long enough time period. So TAMs, a small TAM would be under 1,000 prospects. A large TAM would be over 50,000, and anything in between would be a medium TAM. So once you know exactly how many people are inside of your market, what I like to do initially is just start gathering all of that data. What I like doing here is I pull everything into two separate tables. So I'll have all of my contacts and then all of my companies. This helps me set up a single source of truth, every single company that I'm setting up cold email for. We may get that data from LinkedIn Sales Navigator, Apollo, Zoom Info, Clay, G7 Lead Finder if we're reaching out to more SMB businesses. Or sometimes what we have to do is create a manual scrape. So for example, if you want to find business brokers, there are directories out there like IBBA where they have all the contact emails of their business brokers, and you can typically get that data pretty easily. So where are we now? We know what type of TAM we have. We know where we could pull that data from. Now it comes to crafting the offer of which will turn a prospect that doesn't know who we are to ultimately say, yes, do you know what? I want to learn more about how you work, how you operate, and how you can help. So how do we actually create these CTAs? Let's start with an example. I previously launched a campaign for a influencer managed agency for ecom. And they were saying, hey, do you want influencer services? It's $5,000 per month. And e-commerce brands, they have thin margins. Typically, they don't want to give up their hard-earned money on a risk. How we started the conversation instead is saying, hey, you know what? We have all these influencers. We have so many influencers. We don't really know what to do with them all. Do you want a list of 25 of them that you could reach out to directly, and they have previously promoted your product? If you're an e-commerce brand, typically that's something that you'd be interested in. It's easy to say yes to, and then we just flipped over a Google sheet with the emails, the contact names, and like a link to their Instagram profiles. This worked incredibly well. Now, there are such things as high commitment offers and then low commitment offers. If we get a prospect to say, yes, do you know what, send me over that data, that would be considered a low commitment offer. On the other hand, what we could do is offer a high commitment offer, which is saying, hey, do you want to take 30 minutes of your time, your very busy time, to meet with us? Depending on which market we are entering, sometimes it's worth to just get a quick pulse check on if people have a small interest in this service offering. Sometimes going for a meeting right out the gate could turn people the wrong way. One thing that Ryan Klog has, and he does state, he runs a company, or he's a co-owner in a company that I think they do something like $30 million a year. But I was watching one of his videos on YouTube recently, and he said that if your offer is good enough, no matter how hard you make the buying experience, people will still find a way to buy it. So the main thing here is don't overstress the call to action. Mainly focus on the value proposition that you're offering through email. Great. Now that we have an offer, what we have the ability to do now is either chunk up or chunk down that offer. What chunking up would be is making the offer more generic. If we're chunking down that offering, we're going to become more specific. And the reason why this is helpful is because buyers, they'll either be aware of a certain problem that they have, or they might even be aware and also they'll be actively shopping for a solution. So depending on where they might be in that buying journey, we should change our messaging accordingly. An example of this is, let's just say that someone is perhaps not problem aware. We could say, are you looking to lose weight by running every single day? If they're solution aware and they already know that they want to lose weight by running every single day, and we're selling a shoe, for an example, we could say, how are you ensuring that your shoes don't cause long-term knee pain? Now, we still might be trying to get a response from both people that want to lose weight, but now we're offering our product in a different way. So this is how we could either chunk up or then chunk down our messaging. Moving forward to the data collection and variable collection framework here. Whenever we're creating copy, if we want to make sure that every single email is personalized, we'll typically need to have variables. And there's two buckets that I like to use here. There are company variables, and then there are prospect variables or contact variables. Whenever we're referencing a company, we typically want to clean company names. So if they have Apple Inc., period, we may want to just reference Apple in an email. You might want to reach out to or normalize the location that they operate in, a summary of what the company does, maybe who their ideal clients might be. And at the contact level, we might want to enrich their full name or their title or their past experience of what it says on LinkedIn. Once we have an idea of what type of offer we want to reach out to our prospects with, where they are in that buyer's journey, what variables we could use for our copy, there are 5 components that I like to break down cold emails within. Now, whenever we're launching a campaign, there are two types of emails. There's standalone emails, then there are reply to emails. The standalone emails will be a completely separate new email thread, and then the reply to emails will be replying to a previous standalone message. Now, for this example, we are going to be using the example of a standalone message, which is a new thread. And the 5 components are the following. We have subject lines, we have intro lines, we have trust building lines as well. And there could be 1 or 2 of these. There could be call to actions, and then finally a PS line. So I'll speak a little bit to these and how I see them. For subject lines, the last thing that we want to do is have something that looks like it's a promotional email. Typically, what I like to go for is to make a subject line that's very short, typically between 2-3 words. Typically, they'll be lowercase, something that might come from it looks like it's coming from an employee or a current client of theirs. Something that's super short, super concise, and it gives a little bit of curiosity for them to click into the actual email. Now, once the prospect has clicked into the email, they'll be able to see the intro line. Then they'll typically skip over to the call to action. Then if they like what they see, then they'll read the trust building lines inside of the middle. They'll look at your value proposition that's included. And then finally, they'll look at your PS lines. So let's talk a little bit about intro lines. What are my thoughts on these? The intro lines are typically the reason they're reaching out to someone and answering the question, why are you relevant? Or they'll say, it'll be an open-ended question and say, it'll try to elicit some type of pain point. In terms of the trust building lines that typically follow the intro line, it'll say something about their past clients. It'll be their value proposition. It'll be any types of guarantees that they do have or their authority in the space. And then it will conclude with a call to action. It could either be a soft call to action saying, hey, if you like what you see or you want to know more, just feel free to let me know. Or they might ask a question that says, hey, do you want to meet for 15 minutes? They might be offering a free lead magnet saying, do you want free leads, as an example? Or finally, it could be a open-ended question saying, hey, is this a challenge that you're experiencing as well? Not to forget, there's the PS lines, and these are a little bit cheeky. Sometimes you could use these to provide a secondary benefit that wasn't listed inside of the main email, because you want to keep your emails very short and concise. You never want to have an email longer than 150 words if you're doing it at a mass. If you're reaching out to 300 people, sometimes sending 200-word emails could work wonders if they're extremely detailed. But if we're assuming that this is for a mass market type of approach, keep your messages short and concise. Then finally, in the PS line, you could also include additional social proof if you want. Now, one thing to look into as well is how can you make sure that there's high quality control for all of the campaigns that you launch? One thing that's incredibly important to do is to verify the validity of all of the email addresses before you send emails to them. If you don't do this, you could have higher bounce rates, which will impact your domain reputation. If your domain reputation goes down, then your emails will typically go to spam. From there, you want to be able to check the accuracy of your variables. If you're using a tool like play.com, go back, pull the first 50 or 100 examples of records and see, do I have above a 99% accuracy on these variables? If not, redo the function. From there, one thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that if you are sending a link in the replies, typically if you're sending a brief to a GTM engineer or the person that will actually be clicking the keys to pull the lead list, to enrich the data for your variables, and to ultimately copyright and then plug in the emails into your email sequencer, you want to make sure that if you are sending any type of links, which I don't recommend, that they are valid and you're not missing one character, which will throw off the entire thing. From there, you want to make sure that your CTAs are functional as well. So if you do have a call to action, you want to make sure you're able to deliver on it. And then finally, just test the email, send it to a couple of your email addresses if you do have a couple burners. And lastly, when it comes to QA, you might want to see how the emails show up on a phone or on a web browser. So to wrap up, what we covered today is how we could ideally create a campaign brief, which outlines who we want to reach out to. What offer are we reaching out to them with? Where on that buying journey are they? And how are we going to be positioning our offer? Where we're going to be getting our list from? How we're going to be able to enrich it with specific variables. And then we also do have some best practices when it comes to QA, such as how are we validating our emails? How are we making sure that all the variables that we're using have a high degree of accuracy? And do the emails look good on our web browser and then also on our phones? The last thing that I should recommend here is that when it comes to split testing and A/B testing, the most important thing that I see a lot of people not do is they just don't make time for it on their calendar. So if you do have a campaign or you're running multiple campaigns, put maybe an hour, 2 hours every single week to just looking at the data, looking to see which subject lines, which call to actions are getting the most amount of responses, and then make a continued version of the winning subject line or the call to action. So that's it. Other additional notes that I would mention here is that if your cold email works for a mass market, feel free to consider ads. Sometimes ads will have a lower cost per lead than cold email if your offer is good enough. Also, if your offer isn't getting enough responses, typically you have an under a 1% response rate, consider checking your deliverability. And last thing for the day is that if your offer is garbage or it's crap, no amount of small variations will be able to 2 to 5x the amount of results you get. Sometimes it's better to start from scratch with a whole completely different offer and then to test that instead of making minor changes. So that's the video for today on how you can go about your cold email strategy. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below and I'll see you on the next video. Have a nice day. Bye.